1, 2, 3. Thanks for joining us. My name is Joe Austin. And for anybody old enough to remember, one of the highlights of Féile was a programme that was called Scéalta, and it was done by myself and others, I have to say. And the idea of Scéalta was to inform and entertain. We selected people from within our community, people who had led, I suppose, an interesting life or had an interesting event. And we're going to try and follow that through. In these days when communication is quite difficult, we're going to try and bring to you a series of interviews of people who you may or may not know. Today, we're going to carry out our first interview, and it's with Séanna Walsh. For anybody that knows Séanna Walsh, he's had a very illustrious, some would say controversial life. So in his 70 years, he's packed so much into that. And we're going to try and broad stroke it by asking him, for those that don't know you, and I know many people know what you do, they don't necessarily know who you are. What part of Belfast are you from?
Okay, Joe, Garamava, that's in Chance Lordslat, or Lordslat, na Dini Ella, and Wayne. As I say, Séanna Walsh, I'm currently the Bonnet store, the manager of the Áras and I originally hail from the east of the city, from Thiar, and I know that actually causes a wee bit of a controversy in and around there, but our actual family home was on the Short Strand itself, so it's not a matter of Ballinmacart or Seaford Street or whatever. It was the actual Short Strand was the original family home, so that is where I'm from. I currently live in Andersonstown, and I am elected as well for my troubles to the Dunmurry area of
one of the things that I have noticed over the last period of curfew is that there seems to be a great traction in putting photographs, a lot of black and white photographs up of various parts of Belfast in and around the 60s and some of the early, particularly the riots in the 70s. So the story behind the black and white photograph, what was life like in the Short Strand growing up in the 60s?
Well, it was very much a working class area. And you're two up, two down, Joe, with most of the houses. The actual houses on the Short Strand had 3 stories, so they were fairly big, and even the families who lived in them were fairly big as well. You would have had most houses at that time, if they could take it, would have had 3 families, 3 different generations of the one family in the house. So you had all of that going on in these working class areas. There was a very strong sense of community bonding, community cohesion, and there was also, the late 60s was a very exciting time for young people, and in that it was very much a period of change right across the world as we watched our newfangled televisions. You could see all these different events unfolding, particularly the conflicts of that period, in the late 60s. And so whenever the conflict came to us, it was no real surprise. It was a bit of a shock in terms of the way that it happened. But whenever you look back, it was no real surprise that because of the treatment of the nationalist population here, that they should challenge the state in the way that they did in the late 60s and early 70s.
My own experience, and I came from Carrickhill, and it was probably a similar experience per se. You come from a large working class family. I come from a large working class family. Was it my parents' aspirations was that I would get a steady job, obviously meet someone, perhaps even get a trade if that was possible. So that was the aspirations of a working class family. Was that a similar experience from your own
Well,
mother?
well, for some reason or another, possibly because I was religious when I was a child, and I was also an altar boy at one stage. And my ma had these aspirations for me to become a priest. And well, they didn't last too long into my early teens once I discovered the female, that whole sort of experience of,
Sex you're talking about.
well, even before actual sex, Joe, because but female company, as opposed to
You mean companionship?
what you're talking about.
I don't think anybody is really going to believe that, but anyway. Um, you've never made a secret of the fact that you were in the IRA.
Right?
Your prison sentences, I think 3 different sentences in all, as testimony to that. If you were to have learned any single thing, apart from don't get caught, but if you were to learn one single thing, what was your first realization of what jail was actually like?
Well, but before you had jail, you had active service. And one of the things about being involved with the IRA, and I know it's become a bit of a cliche, but the first meeting that we had whenever we got involved was that we were told that this is only going to end up one way or the other. That you're going to go to jail or you're going to go to Milltown. One or the other, or possibly both, one after the other. And there were no sort of, they didn't try and dress it up and portray it as anything glorious or fancy or anything else. They laid their cards on the table right at the very start. This is where you're going, son. So you may get your head around it. The fact that it ended up as jail was probably somewhat of a relief. But the crack yourself, Joe, whenever you're young, you feel you're fearless in the main. You don't fear anything. You feel that you're impregnable as well, that whatever happens to other people, it won't happen to you. So there was that sort of sense of that everything will be okay. And that's what it was for a lot of us. One of the things about the short strand in the early 72 was the casualties that we took as a result of premature explosions. So you had in February, we had the 4 lads killed on the Knapjoe carriageway up around that part of the world. And then we had the 4 volunteers plus the 5 civilians who were killed at Anderson Street. It was really it was horrendous, and the impact that had on our community, it was you wonder at times how any community could come back from that. And then when I was in prison, we also had a number of killings by loyalists, where they came into the area and they actually shot people. They killed people in bars and all of that type of stuff.
The British government, in a propaganda thrust around what prisoners were involved in the Cash in Armagh, described it as the Sandhurst. In other words, a university or training for the IRA. And I noticed behind you, you're in Áras, you're in the College Centre as we speak. The poster behind you, which you obviously can't see, is a poster depicting an event that James Connolly is advertised to take part in. Was the politics of jail a grounding bed for what you later became in terms of an elected representative? and a Sinn Féin ambassador right across the world.
Well, one of the things that prison gives you the opportunity to do, particularly in the cages setting, was that it gives you the opportunity to really study the struggle, to study Irish history. We were in prison as a response to the outrage of the Union Estate, partition, discrimination, all of that, and also the introduction of the British Army, the occupation of our streets by the British Army. That's why we ended up involved with the IRA. That's why we ended up in prison. But while we were in prison, we then had the opportunity, and not only the opportunity, Joe, some of us saw it as a duty, that we had a duty to come out of prison one way or the other. You know what I mean? Because we regarded ourselves as political prisoners, we always believed that you had a duty to try and escape if you could. But if you weren't able to manage that, to come out of prison with a better sense of what the struggle was about than what you had whenever you went in.
I just want to put that into context, and forgive me or correct me if I've got the lengths wrong, but I think you were 21 years in prison in total.
Yeah, 21 years total.
21 years, which is as long as Nelson Mandela, by the way.
Almost, yeah.
Almost. As you changed in your journey through struggle and through prison, and you spoke about the first time you were admitted or invited to go to prison, did the prison change dramatically? Was it a different place the last time from the first time?
Yeah. Well, whenever I first landed into Long-Kesh, it was very much a prisoner of war camp, January 1973. So our sense of it was that we were prisoners of war. The whole feel, the whole sense of the place, you had the orange lights, the neon lights, you had the barbed wire, you had the steel gates, the Nissan huts, and it was very much like you see in the Second World War films of an archetypal prisoner of war camp. You had the British Army on the perimeter with machine guns, helicopters above us. You had watchtowers with searchlights, all of that type of stuff. So you knew exactly what you were coming into. You didn't have any contact with the prison warders. You didn't have any contact with ordinary prisoners or with loyalists. And therefore, we took advantage of that to educate ourselves and to try and ensure that anybody who wished to return to the struggle once they were outside the jail, that they would do so in a more effective way. Basically, that was what we were about.
And how does that contrast to your last term in prison?
Well, the middle term was the worst because that was the blanket period. From 76 to 81 was the blanket protest, and then I was in for a couple of years after that. During the blanket protest, the British government had decided to smash the resistance of the Republican prisoners, to break the will of the Republican prisoners to resist British rule in our country. And somehow or another, they saw the prisoners as a soft underbelly. And, it all comes back to the Keir Nugent bit again, where, the only way you're going to get me to wear that uniform is to nail it in my back. So the British had put a whole paraphernalia of courts and changing the law, Castlereagh, all designed to break the resistance of Republican prisoners. And they ran up against a 19-year-old guy from Divis Flats who said, nah, I'm not having this. And basically, their whole strategy went up in the air as a result of all of that. So that was a very difficult period. And some of the guys who came through that period they've likened elements of what's currently happening, where people have to confine themselves to the house, and they have to look at the four walls, and they have to look at the same two or three faces about the house. Some of our guys have likened what's currently going on with the virus to that particular period. I suppose there are similarities, but
except what is missing is that nobody's beating you.
Yeah,
nobody's beating most of
them. Nobody's beating you, and you have access to better food and drink and your TV and all sorts of different sort of bits and pieces. But there are elements to it that may well chime with what's going on. And just to finish off, the third period was when we had basically broke the system again. From 1988 until 1998 with the Good Friday Agreement, and we had put in place, and it was basically political status without the prison authorities acknowledging it. But we had control over our own lives, over our own education, and everything else. Once again, during that particular period.
One of the interviews that we hope to carry out over the next short period is with a retired mental health nurse. And in fact, the point that you make there, what he will be helping us through is that how do you deal with that isolation of being curfewed or locked in or whatever. So we're going to return to that as a subject. If I can jump you forward once again. And these are giving us a snippet of, as I said, a life well spent. But if I can jump you forward, you're out of prison for the last time. You're into, well, so far in touch wood, you are into a completely new social, economic, political situation. How hard, if at all, is it or was it to adjust to that?
I suppose, Joe, for me, I was at a bit of an advantage to a lot of our comrades who came through prison, and that I had a very strong Republican family to support me, particularly in the person of my dear wife, Sinead Moore, and what I
also an ex-prisoner
who experienced Armagh jail during the prison protests as well, from 77, I think it was, until 84. So you had that sort of stability whenever through my imprisonment and whenever I came out. Maybe other people don't think that I'm as stable or as grounded as what I am, but that was one of the elements that allowed me to basically slot into a role whenever I came out of prison. And if you remember back to the period that I came out in 1998 with the Good Friday Agreement, as a Republican activist, I considered it to be my responsibility, and I felt that I had a duty to engage with the Republican base whenever I did come out, because I was convinced that we were on the road to achieving the All-Ireland Republic that people had suffered and died for, and that we were on the right road to achieving that. I felt that I had a duty, along with our comrades, to travel this country and to engage with comrades who were less convinced than what I was, who were not sure of the intentions of the British to, under the right circumstances, to get themselves out of this part of Ireland and to leave us to our own devices. And one of the hardest aspects of that was the engagement with the, and this is particularly important at this time of the year, but it was to engage with the families of the Republican dead, the people who had laid down their lives for the new republic. And so It was a fairly challenging period, I have to say.
And also at this period, and I'm glad you brought up engagement, because also at this period you were heavily involved in engagement with the Loyalist Union's Protestant community.
Mm-hmm.
People who we are estranged from, by and large, that through choice. But was that difficult? Was it an experience? Was it something that you think paid dividends, or was a bonus for the peace process?
Well, it was strange and engaging with unionists and loyalists. But one of the things that we did with whenever I was working with the ex-prisoner organisations of Question and Ear Kimney and with Thiar and Hall on that, was that we ensured that you know, that we ensured that. Hold on, Joe. Sorry. We ensured that what we were doing was we were allowing people, giving people a safe space to talk, to encounter, to engage with Republicans. And you know, I've mentioned loyalists there, and so have you, loyalists and unionists. But we also had a major engagement with former British soldiers and with former members of the RUC as well. You know what I mean? So there was all of that was done during this period that you talk about with the ex-prisoner organisations. And while it was difficult, you know, at the same time, you understand that once the war is over, and you've got to get on with helping to rebuild a new society. You know, if that is how you see it, and if you do see it that way, you have a duty to do it. You know, you actually, at times, you almost have to become a crusader in that sort of in that endeavour.
I want to ask you a question that maybe a lot of people will wander around, and you talk about. I understand the logic of engaging with former comrades, telling them, giving them the state of play, and trying to convince them and trying to settle them and all of that there. But to engage with people, perhaps from the RUC or families of RUC personnel who died in the conflict, did it give you an insight into their pain? Did it give you an insight into how they seen you, for instance? I mean, you're the enemy. You're the person that maybe or possibly are helped to take the life of their loved one. Was there a learning curve involved with that for you as well?
Well, there's a learning curve there, all right, Joe. And one of the things that, you know, you have to be sensitive about how you present yourself, and you have to be sensitive about what people have suffered and what people have endured during that whole period of the conflict. And one of the things that I felt was that there was no sense in being mealy-mouthed about it. I felt that you had to be straight with them, and that you couldn't really sort of jazz it up, or you couldn't really hide it, or in any sense, or you know, if you tried to lie to them, or tried to be something that you weren't, they would see through you right away, which was why I put my cards on the table right from the very start, that I was an unrepentant Fenian, and that the regret that I have was the fact that we had a conflict here in the first place. The fact that it required a conflict, I believe, to change the society that we were living under. So, you know, that creates its own difficulties as well for some people.
Another dimension that we can touch on briefly of the peace process was that from an international perspective, the temptation of many areas of conflict was to take our experience as a blueprint to resolve their problem. I'm thinking, in fact, of the Palestinians, the people in the Basque Country, just to give you two examples. We were at pains to point out, and I want to come on to this point, that we didn't have the answers. We had some of the answers to some of the problems that affected us, but it was very much work in progress. And I know for a period you were kind of sent to every art and part to try and lend whatever advice we could. So can you give us a flavour? I know you can't go into everywhere, but can you give us a flavour of that?
Well, without getting into sort of nitty gritty of it, right? One of the things that I found myself in at various times engaging with people in different parts of the world and from different parts of the world, people who were themselves involved in conflict. And a lot of the time it was about, how did you manage to come out of it? And what I always explained is the point that you're only after making, that what we experienced in our conflict was us. And it wasn't going to be, it's not like a single transferable process that you can lift the process from here and slot it in anywhere else, and that will work for them, because history, geography, demographics, everything, culture is so very, very different right around the world. And therefore, the best that we could do was to explain to them how we actually managed to bring our conflict to an end and what was required under those circumstances to bring the conflict to an end. And one of the things that I didn't really mention whenever I talked about the last period in jail, but one of the reasons why I became so convinced about the worth of this type of work was in the run into the Good Friday Agreement. Gerry Adams requested of Nelson Mandela that he send a team of his top negotiators across to engage with the Republican activists on the outside. But more importantly, in regard to this point, he also sent them into Longcash to engage with the IRA prisoners. And that engagement, for me, really sealed it. Sealed the idea that we could achieve the Republic, that the armed struggle had taken us as far as we could, and that we now had a responsibility to move on to another way. And therefore, whenever I think back to how that conversation impacted upon me, that I am conscious that people from this part of the world can help others in different parts of the world in different conflicts get their heads around the fact that you can still achieve your objective, that armed struggle in a conflict situation can only take you so far, that there is, there's a time limit on it, and there's a point where it has to end, and you have to move on and find another way of progressing and taking you to where you're seeking to go.
And that's exactly what I want to do in a second. I want to go to another phase of your political life. But before I do, for those who have just joined us, you're listening to Scéalta. It's sponsored by Feirste here. My name is Joe Austin, and my guest today is Séanna Walsh. So this is a series of interviews that we're going to do over the next way. We are trying to both entertain and inform. You're welcome to join us, and we'll tell you at the end of this program, this interview, how exactly you do that. So back to you, Séanna. I want to deal briefly with the period of, again, what many would consider a major change. So political representation. And I know you were a reluctant bride for a number of reasons. Not that you were reluctant about the work, but it was something that you had kind of viewed was a younger person, perhaps as business. But of course, you were proved once again to be wrong, and you were very very committed in a very illustrious period as a councillor. So first of all, tell me if you can, and we're mindful of the time, how you became a councillor and what was your experience?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm a councillor, and I regard the fact that I am a councillor as simply another aspect of my Republican activism, of doing something to help, I suppose, the community that I live in, of seeking to give them the best representation that we can to, you know, and I'm not really sure of how other people will view this, but, you know, we try and make this city the best city that it can be. And for a lot of people who talk about that, they talk about the city centre. They talk about all of the big sort of capital projects that you will see in the city centre and everywhere else. But for me personally, and for the team that I work with, the Sinn Féin team and the council, the city is nothing without its communities, with particularly the working class communities which built this city, you know, over 120, 150 years ago. And you've talked about the poster behind me here about Connolly and all the rest of that. And that's why working here in RSC Connolly, for me, it was a dream job, because you're working on two levels. At one, you're down there in the council, you're representing the community that you come from. And here in RSC Connolly, you are promoting the work, you're promoting the politics, you're promoting the vision of James Connolly and all that was involved in that. So that's why, Joe, I have a dream job. I'm the bonnet store of RSC Connolly.
Well, I want to come on to the Connolly Centre, and I want you to kind of take us through the ABCs of it. But before I do, for those who may not be either old enough or who might not know the logistics or the location of the Connolly Centre, for many years, a purpose-built Connolly building of some type has been a pipe dream with Republicans, perhaps for 100 years, but certainly for 50 years. And it was something that people talked about and wondered, could it ever happen, and forgot about it and all of that. And a while ago, through the office of Harry Connolly and others, this idea began to take feet. It began to be a possibility. And from being a possibility, it became a reality. And of course, that's where you're sitting today. And you described it at the beginning of the interview as your second home with the sleeping bag. So just what is the ethos behind the Connolly Centre, RSC Connolly? What is the ethos? What is the purpose of it?
Well, the first of all, the purpose of it is to promote and educate around the politics and the vision of James Connolly and the, you know, what that sort of politics represents today, and how it is still so relevant to us here in this this period that we're in, and how it can become somewhat of a unifying force across the city, you know, helping us to engage with our working class brethren from other parts of the community and other political perspectives, and to help, to create a different sort of a different sense of what we're about, and what it's about ideas. It's like an ideas institute. It's about educating people. It's about engaging people. It's about giving people a sense of a possible new politics, which is based on a belief that's hundreds of years old, which is about equality, which is about a better life for the ordinary working class people of not only this city, but right across this island.
When this crisis will be over, and hopefully that'll be sooner rather than later, and we have a flux of people looking their freedom, looking to leave their homes, their flats, their apartments, and many of them will drift towards the colony centre. So what can they expect from the ground floor to the building? So they come through the front door. What are they greeted with?
Well, for anybody who hasn't visited the centre before, I think that they will be very pleasantly surprised by the experience. And once you come into the colony centre, once you come into the Áras, you have, on the one hand, you have the cafe, and the cafe speaks for itself. State-of-the-art coffee, half decent food. But for us, it's about the message. It's about the life of Conway, and showing people who are unaware of the politics of Conway, the breadth of his politics. The life that he led, that he wasn't just a one-trick pony, that it wasn't just about Easter 1916. And so that's the life of the man and his family and all the rest of that, hopefully, is presented to people once they walk in through that front door. Then, as you move up onto this floor, you have the different artifacts which are from that whole period of the Easter Rebellion and what have you. And then you move on into our artworks, which are, I have to say, very, very standout and speak for themselves. And you come into our the Colony Library, which gives people a space for study. It gives people a space for research and access to a lot of books, which I don't believe that they would exist in any other institution in this city. I'm not sure about Dublin or anywhere else on the island, but I definitely feel that we probably have the best collection of works that are written by Conway himself, which were influenced by Conway, and which are from that same sort of political perspective of equality, of workers' rights, of the victory of the working class and all that's involved in that. And then you have the top floor, whereby we can facilitate book launches, we can facilitate lectures, we can do concerts from time to time. We can also organize for trade unions, community organizations. We provide a space for them to come in and use our which we believe are state-of-the-art facilities to organize their events, whatever they happen to be.
Good Friday, of course, is your 1 year birthday. So, a happy birthday in advance. So, looking back on the year, both from an international and a national perspective, the people who visit the Colony Centre have been diverse. They've came from all arts and parts of the world. But I suppose the point you were making earlier on, they came from all arts and parts of the city and of the north.
They very much did. Whenever you think about this place, and anytime that you talk about Áras, you have to thank the trade unions in the US, because without without their support, without their buying into this project, and as much as what we did right from the very start, this project wouldn't have happened. So, in terms of all that, I suppose you can't not mention about the American connection there, Joe. But the fact that we have managed to build bridges where probably none existed before. You know, we have had people in here. One of the stories I like to tell is about the guy who came in and pointed to the Robert Balla painting and asked me, he said, "Do you know anything about this guy here?" And he pointed to the British soldier who's captured in the Robert Balla Terrible Beauty painting. And he said, "That man, I knew that man is my Uncle George." And he went on to tell that story. He himself was from a unionist background, and he had an incredible story to tell about his Uncle George. And let's face it, without the RSE Calnia, he would never have been within 1,000,000 miles of the Falls Road. Do you know what I mean? And so you have so many different wee stories like that, Joe.
Well, we have 5 minutes left of this interview, and I want to round up with a particular series of brief questions. But let me remind anyone who's just listened or just found us that this is Scéalta, sponsored by Fáilte Feirste here. My name is Joe Austin, and my guest today is Séanna Walsh. This program is designed to, I suppose, entertain and inform, and it will be one of a series of programs that we'll put out. Tony Bones is our engineer, and hopefully he's got it right, so time will tell about that. Easter, a very important time for Republicans, very practical time for Republicans. This Easter will be like no other Easter. So, for instance, there will be no parades, there will be no ceremony, there will be none of that per se in the public domain. So, what would your Easter consist of?
Well, I don't wish to give too much away at this stage, Joe, because I'm not sure when this is going to be going out. But we do have a few things lined up here at RSE Calnia, which hopefully will make this Easter less lonely and help people not to feel just as isolated as they possibly do because of the situation with Áras and what have you. So in our house we will tune in and engage with friends in the same way that we're doing here.
Yeah.
In splendid isolation. We will fly our flag, and we will commemorate our fallen comrades in all sorts of wee personal ways throughout the day, Joe.
I began by asking you, for those that don't know you, other than your name, which is fairly well known, that young boy, a young man from the Short Strand in Belfast. Do you recognise him in your work now? Do you kind of look back and laugh, or do you see the continuity? That's the word I'm looking for. Of you sitting in a Connolly Centre now, as opposed to sitting in a cell.
Well, and truth be told, Joe, I didn't expect to see, whenever I was 16, I landed in the Long Cash. I didn't expect to see 20. When I was 20, I landed back in the Long Cash for that period of the blanket protest, and I didn't think that I was going to come out of that alive. And I did. Whenever I went back into jail for the third time at 32, 32, I thought, well, that's it. They're going to throw away the key this time. but I'm here. I've come through it. I have a fairly good life. I have a brilliant family, and I have a dream job. So, what more can I say?
And you have some great friends.
I have one or two very good friends.
Well, look, listen, I think we've concluded our discussion. I want to thank you for being an entertaining and an enlightening guest. I hope that those who have listened, who have joined in, will come back and listen to others. We'll tell you at the end of this broadcast how you can access us. If indeed you are aware of people who you think we should be interviewing, please make contact. Please let us know, and we'll try and, with all the technical difficulties that sometimes presents, but we'll try and arrange that. So you've been listening to Scéalta. You've been listening to Séanna Walsh, my guest. My name is Joe Austin. We are sponsored by Fáilte Feirste here. We're half broadcasting from Áras, Chonghaile. So for all of that, and thank you.
Very much, yes.